Hello and welcome to Further Inside Chor Leoni. My name is Erick Light and I am the artistic director of Chor Leoni Men's Choir. And joining me for a wonderful conversation here are Paul Scholtz and Jacob Christopher from the group Cantus. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Hello there.
It's lovely to have you here, and I know that we tried to do this before in June, and I'm just so happy that you were able to reschedule and be with us. It means a lot to me. As you know, I have a little history with just a tad. This will just be as curious to me, but not everyone knows who you are, especially maybe West Coast folks. Tell us a little bit about Cantus. Who is Cantus? What is Cantus?
Yeah, so Cantus is a professional tenor and bass ensemble based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we're now in our 26th year, 25th or 26th, depending on how you count it, but we like to say 26th. And we started at a little college called St. Olaf, and Erick Light was one of those original four founding members. And so this group started with some undergrads who just love to sing. At least that's what Erick tells us. And then in 2001,
we thought it was all right.
Yeah. In 2001, we went professional, and so we've been a touring ensemble. We tour about 100 days a year. We do about 36 shows in the Twin Cities in Minnesota every year, and then a ton of outreach. We work with thousands of students every year, and yeah, this is our full-time profession. So we're really fortunate to have this platform. And the one thing that's really kind of unique to Cantus now is that with Chanticleer as one of the other flagship full-time vocal group in the country, they work with a music director. In Cantus, the burden and the opportunity that we get to share is that we are all equal partners in the artistic direction. So that's something that some folks don't know about us, but we live it every day, and it makes it a lot of fun. But it's also different work and hard work, as Erick knows, being an artistic director himself.
Yeah, I love how you phrase that, because with every opportunity comes a challenge, and vice versa. So I totally, and a lot of what you're talking about there are things that I want to speak with you about. I think Cantus is in a unique position in a number of ways. First of all, there's a lot of professional choral singing going on in North America right now, but a lot of it is gig work, and Cantus is a little bit more of a profession or a career kind of place because of the full-time aspects of it. And that's kind of allowed the group to be both a touring ensemble and a local one. And I want to talk about the touring. As you're going around and performing, and I want you to answer this question as a performer, and even in some of the educational things that you do around, especially North America, which is primarily where you're touring, where do you see, what perspectives do you see trending in the choral world? Where are the successes happening, and where do you see kind of the field happening in the various places where you intersect with it?
Yeah, for us, one of the things that, as I mentioned, makes us different is that we have this collaborative structure where there's 8 different people bringing their artistic sensibility. And I think for choral music right now, and for classical music in general, we're kind of grappling with, how is it going to remain relevant? And I think there's a lot of folks working really hard to make sure that it does continue to stay relevant. And something that I kind of notice as we travel around to different presenting organizations across the country, a lot of these places have their own really storied traditions and proud heritage of who they've presented, the space that they're hosting ensembles. And so there's a little tension sometimes between what the older committed big donors might want for that series and what maybe the presenter themselves, the person who manages the bookings, what they might want, and then what the audience themselves might want at that place. And so when Cantus programs and tours, we tend to try and make our programming relevant and tell stories. And so, yeah, it's always interesting to hear, what did the audience think? What did the presenter think? And then what do we hear through our agent that the big donors thought? And sometimes there's this tension. And I think it kind of speaks to classical music trying to find its way generally in this modern context.
Jacob, talk to me. Let's talk about the audiences in touring. What is the most resonant for them, especially I'm thinking abroad, not in with your home crew in Minnesota.
I think one of the things that we find with our audiences is that they really appreciate when Paul's speaking about doing these like programs that are a little bit maybe more challenging at times. We find that we are not preaching to the audience. We are guiding them in this conversation, and we have these moments where we have speaking moments. So we kind of give more insight into why we are here in the program, why this music you're about to hear has been programmed, and generally speaking, our audiences at the end of the show will talk to us about like what moved them and how the program, in some instances, how they appreciate it. We didn't dumb down a program for a specific, maybe more rural area. So we find that the audiences really appreciate the programming that we do and bring to them. So yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting ride these past 4 years.
Yeah, and I stay well enough in tune to know where you guys are touring and those sorts of things. And certainly back in the day, this was true, and I think it probably still is true. You're going to play larger cities and you're going to play smaller towns and those sorts of things. How do I phrase this? Lord knows we're living in a world that is at least billed to us as divided and maybe between rural and urban and other ways. And choral music can certainly walk in a lot of areas. Do you see reactions being different, violently one way or violently the other way, in terms of what people like or dislike or respond to? And I think maybe not just the whole of the program, but are there specific pieces, themes, etc., that may be the case?
Yeah, there's definitely that tension, and I think one thing that immediately came to mind was, I think the more specific the speaking moment or the speaking moment that's going to lend the piece context, the more specific that can be and the more personal. So if you can share a story, if you're going to do a piece about accepting gay marriage or accepting homosexuality, like we had a piece that we did by Melissa Dunphy called What Do You Think I Fought For at Omaha Beach? And it's just incredible testimony that was written by a veteran, and someone came up to him and asked, do you believe in equality for gay and lesbian people? And he turned to them and said, what do you think I fought for? And the implication, he goes on to explain that he has 4 sons and one of them is gay, and he fought for freedom and equality for all people. And so we performed that piece and that show all around the country in rural and in urban areas. And I think because of the way it was situated and because people could empathize with that familial relationship and wanting the best for our kids, that it wasn't positioned in a way that was divisive. But certainly there are pieces that will program, like I'm sure you're familiar with Ethan Sperry's arrangement of the A.R. Rahman tune Zikr, which is incredible. But if you're going to want to perform at maybe a conservative Christian college, they may not want you to perform it. And so, yeah, there's definitely that tension. And sometimes, depending on the show, we might have a little bit of anxiety about how is this moment tonight going to be taken here in a rural place where we know that political leanings are less progressive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything to add there, Jake?
Yeah, Jacob.
I think the funny thing is, in my experience, I don't think I've ever had a moment before a performance where I've actually felt that. The Zikr was performed before I joined Cantus. But in all of our travels, I've not once had a moment where I was like, I feel nervous to sing here or to perform these songs for this audience. It's everybody is so wonderful and they want their audiences to hear this beautiful music. And we always come presenting beautiful music. It might have a little bit of a message at times, but they're still going to get the beautiful music that they wanted. And so I've never felt nervous about performing any maybe more potentially difficult songs.
And that's fantastic. I remember, in fact, the very first year that we programmed Zikr, I was still with Cantus, and we had a church that was presenting us, and the presenter wanted the piece. They knew what the program was. They said this is going to be great, and it was. I think we were doing it. There was some piece from Christianity, one from Judaism. So we kind of had the three pillars of the Abrahamic tradition, and Zikr was going to be a part of that. And the pastor of the church said, not on your life, not on your life. And we did it anyway. And I guess the pastor, this would be after I was on the road, but the pastor came, the group did it. He stood there like this the whole time. And after the piece happened, he left. And
Well, and that's
the audience, of course, loved it. And it was just this one voice that was trying to squelch it. So sometimes you have to have that courage of your convictions to just say, people are generally good, and there's a reason why they're coming to something like Cantus, and they're going to experience it. Yeah, it's interesting that you're still having that problem 12 years, 15 years later. Good gravy.
I think it also depends too. Like, are you trying to say something? I mean, I think the key for us is, like, again, specific storytelling and trying to build connections and build empathy between people. And we're really not, if we're ever trying to say you need to believe X, Y, or Z, then we're going to get into trouble. And it's more about, like, let's highlight a story and just talk about this person or these people. And there's so many places for empathy, as opposed to, you've got to believe this, yes or no, clap or boo. But yeah, it's always a little every year. I mean, if you're not worried about some of those moments, I feel like you're not pushing hard enough on your artistic brain.
Sure. I want to turn a little bit to Minnesota, and I think that was at least in the formation of the group and the early years, and certainly with the audience that you've developed, the home audience that's really developed around Cantus in Minnesota. It's an important part of the group's identity and history, even if it isn't necessarily coming out of that. The style of singing and whatever is necessarily coming out of the Lutheran choral tradition, but it's definitely a place that loves choral music and does choral music, like, way too much, frankly. No, but I'm curious as to how do you find that audience, and maybe not that dipping in night to night on the tour bus, but that long-term relationship that the group is having. That has to happen over, what has there been, 40 people in Cantus over the years, something like that, and those faces change on the stage, but a lot of those faces are the same ones that were there when I was an undergrad. So talk to me about what that relationship is like for you.
Well, funnily enough, we had a season preview last night, and we haven't seen our audience in so many months. And last night we were able to have a Zoom meeting where we kind of just chatted with them and told them about what we have planned in the next few months and into 2021. And seeing their faces, it's emotional. Like, you get to see these faces in performance, and you connect with them, and they are your biggest supporters. And you see that and you hear that after talking to them at the end of the concert. So seeing them last night was just kind of overwhelming, because you never know. You want to be able to see these faces, and sometimes you just miss that. But it's a connection thing. And what we're able to do with our home audience specifically is that we see them at potentially 5 times a year, because we have 5 different shows that we perform for them. So if they're a super fan, they're going to be there every single time. And you start to form these connections, and it's something that I've never experienced before in any other performing ensemble.
Yeah. Paul,
Yeah, I think they too. There's the challenge about Cantus too is that when you get to really love these members, and so when, as Jake is talking about, we've had this community really that holds us up, and we're lucky to have a really robust individual giving, contributed revenue from our home Minnesota audience. So people get really invested in individuals. You get to hear them sing solos. You get to hear them deliver speaking moments. We have a hilarious competition called Cantus Idol, where we vie for the crown with pop pieces. And so they get to know us personally. And so it's it's part of the beauty that Cantus is made up of 8 people, but then the sadness is that they get so upset when we leave.
Yeah.
And it gives our executive director a lot of heartburn when he hears someone's going, because he's like, oh no, what is, our big donor X or our super fan Y gonna say about that?
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to have that kind of buy-in.
And it, especially in the early days when some of those initial people sort of went on to other things, the question, the question in everyone's mind is like, how can you be Cantus without Al Jordan? Like that's not possible. And and it is, and those are tricky ways to navigate, because this is about an interpersonal connection. But if I have one thing that I'm very proud about with Cantus, is that sort of the idea and the concept of this, and the overarching feeling of what this was about and is about, is continuing on, and it finds new threads and new paths over the years, and that's it's very gratifying. And so I just want to thank you for keeping the torch lit. It's super important. I want to turn a little bit to when things are written or commissioned for Cantus. I know that there's lots and lots of layers of, everyone is kind of their own artistic director in Cantus, and decision making takes maybe a bit. It's certainly more invested, but it takes a bit longer. As you're making, let's just say, the choice of what composer that you're going to be engaging, what sorts of thoughts are going into that for you these days?
I think we just had a big meeting about commissioning who we want to commission next, and we probably have a couple of big brainstorming sessions every year, maybe 3 or 4 around commissioning. We like to do it as often as we can, because we're a leader in the field. We want to add to the repertoire. We want to champion new voices in choral music, and I think it comes down to folks have their own preferences, and we make our pitch and we try and get people to back us and win that vote for who we're going to choose. But it comes down to this.
You sit on different sides of the aisle, the Melissa Dunphy people versus the Michael McGlynn people.
Exactly. But it comes down to the specificity of, what program do we have coming up? Like we've got a program called My Journey Yours that's going to be our touring show next year, and it's kind of about the reasons people choose to leave their homes. And so whatever that might be, if that's the seeking new opportunity, if it's oppression at home, if it's whatever it is, and so telling these stories. And so then commissioning for that, it became which of these composers we're offering might have the most compelling story to tell as related to this concept. So so if Jake's going to bring something to pitch, he's got to talk about the composer's specific history, or what they've written, or how their compositional voice will lend itself to this. And so the more specific you can be, I mean, this is with anything in life, the more likely people are going to get on your boat and sail with you.
To extend the metaphor or something, yeah. Jacob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's literally it. It really pays to be able to sell, to make sure you come with all of these reasons why this person is the perfect option for us right now. And it really works like that, because then you are able to, we have to come to consensus. And so if you're able to really fight for that person, it pays dividends.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing that I want to ask you in terms of, so let's say you decided on the composer, and you have a theme, and you have a text, and you have all of those sorts of things. So much of it then comes down to the nitty gritties of, what are the notes on the page, and how that's going to apply to a group the size of Cantus. Certainly when I was there, most of the male tenor bass repertoire was written for larger choirs, like what I'm doing right now, frankly. And some of it didn't, making the transference, especially even when we were at 12 singers, which is bigger than what Cantus is today. Some of that transference was a little challenging at times. Of course, there were opportunities. You could hear a piece that normally would have 60 voices with fewer. But what is the difference for you? Like when the piece comes, are there moments you're like, that's great for Chor Leoni, but that's not going to work so hot for Cantus, and vice versa? How are you adding to the male choir repertoire so groups like me can do your stuff while still making it work for you guys? If that question makes sense.
Funnily enough, like we generally perform, most of the stuff that we perform is already composed. And so most of the stuff that's already written is composed for an ensemble like yours. So we're taking that music and having to sing, right, for those beautiful voices that we were able to be part of. Yeah. But we're trying to figure out, we've programmed pieces where we're like, this is a great piece, it fits this show so well. And we realize this is not a song for 8 voices. So we have to have that conversation. If we've already programmed it, it's part of the show, we might cut it. It might just be something where we have to choose not to do it. But when we're commissioning, we're able to work with that composer, and they know that they're writing for 8 specific voices or 8 singers, and they can't do the huge, grandiose, like the moments that might be a Chor Leoni moment.
Yeah. And I think too, there's always I feel like there's a little bit of a philosophical fight within Cantus or struggle over the years, maybe 1 or 2, where this pendulum will swing where, you know, we want it to be so accessible for a while. Like, we got to get a work by, you know, composer X that everybody can sing, and that it's going to be that Cantus classic that that everyone can you know, perform with their high school choir and their college choir, thumbs up. And then we'll say, oh, we've been doing too much of that. We got to do something that's really, really challenging vocally. And so we're like, we got to find somebody who's going to write something so virtuosic, because really, to sing in Cantus, you have to be basically a soloist first. And so sometimes you get these compositions that are unbelievably fun to sing and so impressive, but nobody else is ever going to perform them. Which, yeah. So I feel like we're always slowly swinging back and forth between those 2 extremes, because they're both exciting for really different reasons.
And there's a place at a table for both. And if a group like Cantus doesn't try to do both of those things, probably not fulfilling the mandate, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm feeling, as for us as a performer, like, it's great to be able to sing these basically songs that high schools could sing, but at a different level. But then also being able to sing these, like, the ones we have to work like 40 hours on. There's such payoff with that.
Yeah.
And I think
sure. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It too comes back to, obviously, I think all 3 of us are implicitly like, we want the audience payoff to be great. Like, that's number 1. And then these are kind of like B1 and B2. Like, we would love for others to perform them, and we want them to be impressive for us.
Absolutely. We just did a major audience survey with Chor Leoni, and it was, you know, actually done by a marketing group, and it was interesting seeing what some of the results were. And the major comeback to us was, people are there for an emotional experience. They don't really care who the composer is, the history. They just don't care. They want that emotional experience. And in my experience, programming for them, they don't care if it's complicated or simple, as long as that whatever you're trying to instill into the moment and into people's hearts, it comes through. And it doesn't matter how difficult the notes are on the page, as long as you make them sound easy. Right.
And part of that is buy-in of our persons. Like, as we're performing, if we don't feel that music, if we don't buy into it, it's not going to translate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I got one more set of questions for you before we wrap this up. Of course, the 800-pound gorilla, elephant, jaguar in the room is COVID, and a group like yours, which it's a performing group. It's a profession. It's all of these things. How are you addressing this? What's the plan forward to get through, and what do you see on the other side?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we just announced our season for 2021, and we're going to have a couple of virtual offerings that we have newly recorded have never before been seen, 2 fall shows and a Christmas program. And actually, one of them will be live streamed from the Ordway, which is a gorgeous performance venue in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then in the spring, we're hopeful that we'll be back performing live by March, but that's kind of what we're planning on. But obviously, we're going to do what's safe, and we'll be flexible. But Cantus is really fortunate because there's only 8 of us, and so we have this built-in advantage over so many amazing community and professional large ensembles. You just couldn't, like, I'm sure for you, like, how hard is it to get all of your singers together? It's not going to be easy.
It's literally against the law right now.
Right,
so.
Right. But for us,
I've been fighting the man for So.
For us, we have this advantage. There's 8 of us, and it's our full-time job. So we can say, hey, everybody, we're going to quarantine for 2 weeks, and we're going to take a strict quarantine, individual quarantine, then take a COVID test. If everyone's negative, we're going to get together. And so that's what we did. We got together at a board member's house in Decorah, out in a rural area, and just lived together for 2 weeks and recorded a bunch of new material. And we're going to be doing that again in October. So calling them Camp Cantus. And we're used to touring. So, of course it's hard to be quarantined because you have to order your groceries. You can't hardly, talk to anybody unless you're outside, and which is all good, but it is obviously restrictive. And I know so many folks who are listening, I'm sure, are also having so many restrictions in their own lives. It's definitely been a hard time for probably everybody. But yeah, we're fortunate we can create content that way. And then there's also some remote recording projects we've been doing. But yeah, I think Cantus is very, very fortunate to be the size that we are and to be employed full time.
Yeah.
Jacob, anything to add to that? Or?
No, it's really, like, basically that's our plan moving forward. It's just a lot of the work is done after Camp Cantus. So we record all these videos, but then we also have to, like, figure out when are we putting them out? How are we editing them together? And, like, what's the timeline for those things? But it ends up being a lot of extra work that Cantus has changed so rapidly and so quickly, but we know that that's how we have to move forward right now.
Yeah. And that's also, we've been doing a virtual masterclass quite a bit with different schools since March, and it's called Making Music in the Real World. And we've done it in person, but basically we talk about our musical journeys, and it's kind of like you best get ready, music kids, for the rough world of professional music. And I'm kind of joking, but really serious, because you have to be ready for anything. And I think the bottom line is you got to hustle and you got to be entrepreneurial. And that's what Cantus has been up to since March. And I'm sure what so many organizations have been. We're all trying to think, what can I do? How can I go the extra mile? How can I think differently about these problems to find solutions? And that if we're talking to the young folks, like, it's entrepreneurial spirit is what it is. And then obviously you got to have your musical ducks in a row, but I would say that that's probably second.
I mean, that's the story of Cantus, entrepreneurial spirit right there.
It's, and throwing yourself into projects even when you're not necessarily trained or qualified for some of them. This very thing right here, I didn't host interview shows up until last March, but you learn to figure these things out. And I think it is such an amazing takeaway. Everything that I've been doing in the last 6 months, and I bet, well, maybe not everything, but I bet a vast majority of the things that you've been doing the last 6 months is nothing you were taught in music school.
Nothing. I think zero.
How to send emails, maybe that's about, or something like that. Because we didn't certainly do Zoom. But I just want to, I wish both of you and the whole group all the best as all the world tries to get through this ridiculous and scary and unprecedented time. We all know what it's going to be, and it's going to take, I think, all of us being a good community for one another to promote what is important about singing at every single level, so that we can all make it out to the other side. So I wish you just really all the best. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Eric.
Eric.